Good morning again, everyone. Welcome to another Tuesday edition of our Front Porch Live, and we're looking forward to questions today. I don't have a lot actually to start with. Pretty relatively quiet week compared to some things that have happened in the past as far as kind of status of the installation and services and things like that. So I think we'll start digging right into questions, and if you've got questions that you'd like to ask out there, you can start posting those, and when we get through some of the ones we had prior to starting, we'll try to work through those. All right, Chief, let's get started.
Yes, sir. How have you celebrated the month of Military Child?
Okay, that's a great question. So, like most things, a little bit different than what we had anticipated and what we had hoped for. But we've seen a lot of creative activities around the base and around some of the functions on the installation. So I think I'd have to give my biggest shout out to the CDCs. Mm-hmm. And they've celebrated Month of the Military Child. Obviously, they're still coming to work, and the children are still showing up for care. And they've gone all in on Month of the Military Child. To include some of the book readings that we've seen. So I went over this morning and read Cracking the Track, my Thomas the Tank Engine book that my son used to enjoy. So I read that this morning. And they're decked out in purple for Month of the Military Child. And they've done a bunch of videos on their own about just things that you can do at home and things that you can do kind of in the situation we're in. So I think that's gone over pretty well. And then on Friday, we had our parade through housing here on Joint Base Andrews. And Kelly and I got to ride along in that. And we had the fire department, the police department, and some of our Military Family Readiness Center folks were out there as well. So probably spent an hour and a half or so going through some of the housing areas. And boy, was it fun to see some of the kids get out on the front lawns, appropriately socially distanced, of course. But to see the fire trucks roll by and make a little bit of noise, I know not everybody enjoyed that, but I think overall that was a great event, just to let the kids know that, hey, this is important to us. Everything we do in our Air Force is a family endeavor, and although unusual circumstances this year, I wanted to make sure that they know how much they're part of our family, and how much they mean to us. So that was a great way to celebrate on Friday.
All right. I agree. I thought it was awesome to see all the families out there and how many people took part.
Yeah. No, that
absolutely.
Was good turnout.
Yeah. So how did you, next question is, how do you like the curbside food pickup at the club?
I think it's a great idea. Okay. And I think, so it serves a couple things.
First off, how was the food?
Well, I've only done barbecue. I did barbecue last week, and it was fantastic, like it usually is. But we have signed up for chicken parmesan tonight, so we're excited about that, and so we're going to give it a second go. And we were really impressed for what they're charging. I thought, that was a big dinner. So I thought it was a great value, and then a great overall experience for folks. So I know that's something they were working on even prior to kind of the restrictions that we have in place, and to see it come to fruition and some folks take advantage of it, I thought was really good. So the word is still spreading on that. So I hoping we do a little bit bigger business, but we're also in kind of this odd time when a lot of the folks that might use that, the folks that commute to the base, might not be coming to the base. So I think if we can give it some legs under these circumstances, when things get back to normal, it might have legs after that. So I'm excited about that. And huge shout out to the FSS, the golf course, and the O Club staff that came together and put together I think a pretty great menu, honestly. The fact that, if you're living on the base and you can have, something different every night, that's pretty good. And even if you only take advantage of it, once or twice, I think that's a big win. So, I thought the food was fantastic, and the idea behind the service is even better. It makes sure that some of our NAF employees, that they're coming to work and they're getting paid, and that's important too. Yeah. So I think just a win all the way around. So was really thrilled about that.
All right, sir. Next question is, what are your thoughts about our international partners bringing medical supplies to the U.S.?
Yeah, that's a great question, because that's been kind of interesting to watch. And one of the unique things about Joint Base Andrews, I think, is the way that we project combat power off of this base. A lot of times that takes the form of diplomacy, blue and white airplanes. So we're used to generating those kinds of activities that go around the globe and impact our nation's business. So to see some of our international friends, allies, partners, depending on who it is, be willing to bring some supplies in and make those donations to the United States government, I think that's been great. I think it teaches us an important lesson about kind of the global supply chain, right, and logistics. I think we've all learned a little bit about that. So if there happens to be more of some supply or material somewhere else in the world where it's not needed, and it can make its way to a place where it's needed, whether that's the United States or anywhere else, I think it's great to see our partners and friends and allies stepping up and willing to do that to assist us. So and just fantastic that Joint Base Andrews gets to be a part of that on occasion, and so that's a pretty rewarding part of the job, I would say.
So the next question is, how long do you think max-teleworking is going to last?
That's a great question. I don't know that I have a very good answer for that right now. OPM put out some guidance, it's been a little over a week, about how you might start to wind down max telework and get back to more of a normal duty status based on some of the conditions that are kind of in the local area. So we are spending a lot of time on that to kind of plot a way forward to what that might look like. I'll tell you, just as as not only the installation commander, but a person who lives here in Prince George's County and in Maryland, it's been uplifting for me to see what Maryland has been able to do as far as testing. So they have increased their testing pretty quickly. I know it's still not where the governor would like it to be, and probably still not where it needs to be to resume some activities. But if you're just tracking Maryland numbers, and again, Virginia's in the same boat too, but looking a little closer at Maryland because that's where we're at. The amount of testing that they've been able to generate over a short period of time, I think is very, very encouraging. And so you've seen the number of positives has kind of fluctuated a little bit between, at 500 or 600 one day, might have 900 the other day, the next day. But it's important to look at how many tests were done in that same time frame. And what I'm seeing is a percentage of positives that's staying about the same, even though the raw number is going up. But the testing seems to be increasing at a pretty good clip. So those are some of the conditions that we know are going to be required for us to get back to whatever the new abnormal is, as General Goldfein has coined it. And so we're trying to figure out what that looks like for this installation. I think it's important to remember. There's a lot of folks on the installation that didn't telework because we still need folks to be here to run the base. And so in addition to telework, for a group of our, portion of our population, we've done things like alternate work schedules, and we've gotten creative on scheduling so that we minimize, the amount of folks that we have in one place at one time, but we're still able to do quite a bit of work. I just got a note from the Mission Support Group commander kind of talking about what CE's been able to do while we've gone through the last several weeks. And it's pretty amazing because it's created kind of an artificial situation on the base. So they've gone out and they've tackled things like the potholes in the roads. They've done huge preventative maintenance efforts, and they're working they're working day and night shifts. They're coming in on weekends, so that, again, we can spread folks out. But what they've been able to get ahead of from an installation point of view is actually pretty amazing. So where it's made sense and we can do it safely, in accordance with the Secretary's guidance and CDC guidance, we've done that, and our airmen have absolutely risen to that challenge. And so it's a pretty neat thing to see it all come together, and that's across the wing. I highlight CE just because that's visible to a lot of folks. But one thing you haven't heard a whole lot about is no heat, no cool. Right. Usually that would be a major story this time of year, and CE is very very quietly worked behind the scenes to accomplish all those tasks that need to be accomplished while doing the things we need to do to keep everybody safe. So it's been really really great to watch.
All right, sir. Next question: can airmen take leave outside of the local area yet?
So the Secretary of Defense guidance is still pretty straightforward on that. Where there are exceptions to the policy for humanitarian, essential travel, mission essential travel, those kinds of things. So the short answer to that is generally no, with some exceptions for humanitarian humanitarian reasons. We are taking a look at to maybe expanding out the local area just a touch, and that really only applies to the 11th Wing. Everybody on the base has a chain of command that has established different criteria. But with the weather getting a little nicer and outdoor exercise being an essential activity in most of the states that surround the base, we might expand that bubble to let folks, maybe take advantage of going on a hike out west if they'd like to. So we think we're going to be able to do that pretty quick.
Yes, sir. Next question is: how are PCSing airmen being affected by COVID-19 currently?
So that kind of depends on the status of the airmen and kind of where they were at in the process.
Yeah.
I guess would be the easiest way to explain this. So we have a small group of airmen that are they're kind of stuck a little bit right now, and they've been put into a waiting transportation status, which means they get per diem entitlements and those kinds of things. And those were the airmen that already had their household goods picked up, so they didn't have anything at home. They were spending that last few days in the TLF before they went to their next assignment, and they kind of got stuck when this happened. So that's one group of airmen. There's another group of airmen that were actually physically in transit. Either were driving in their cars the next place, and generally they were allowed to proceed to that next location. And then we have most of the rest of us that might have been anticipating PCSing over the summer, and those things have been delayed based on the Secretary's travel guidance. So those are all kind of, each case is unique. Some folks might be able to move, but generally I would expect the PCS cycle to push out a little bit into the future. And I think some report no later than dates have already been adjusted to reflect that. A couple of caveats on that. When the Secretary published his new guidance last week, he did say they would review it every 2 weeks. So it's possible that we're able to do things sooner than we thought, or sooner than the current guidance is. But right now that was pushed out pretty far for PCSing. And then it's going to depend on the destination. I think it's going to be very case by case as we kind of work through all the PCS.
What's going on in that area?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Yes, sir.
Yep.
All right. All right, sir. Next question. With the military making changes to their leave policy, have you seen any changes to civilian leave, specifically being able to carry more than 240 hours or 30 days a year?
So I saw that question after the last Facebook Live, and I did not have a good answer for it. So I did a little research, and unless it's changed recently in the last day, there was no guidance given for civilian leave accrual like it was for the military. So the military was allowed to accrue leave up to fiscal year 23, I think we said.
Yes, sir.
But they have not put out similar civilian guidance, and I'm not sure that we'll get that, to be honest, because there's a little different rule set for military leave versus civilian leave, and as far as the stop movement order as well. So that's takes you down an interesting path. While civilians might be able to take leave, their annual leave, and might be able to travel, there's really nothing to travel to right now.
Open.
Right? So I understand where the question comes from, and on the surface of it, It certainly seems like something that should be explored, but I'm not aware of any guidance yet that's come out to address that particular scenario.
Yes, sir. Next question is, so last week you mentioned that there were discussions about opening things back up. Any updates?
So I think I'll just tie that back into the telework conversation because I think it's all part of the same conversation. So we are absolutely looking at the activities on the installation that we think we can open and operate safely. But we also don't live in a bubble here. So we have to be cognizant of what's going on, around us, of what the state of Maryland has in place, and so it's something that you don't want to be too far out in front of, and you don't want to be too far behind of either. So there's a lot of work and effort going into kind of what that looks like and how we start to bring some things back online. But I mean, Chief, there's not a day that goes by that we're not having those conversations.
Yes,
and
sir.
it's a robust discussion. There's a lot of different opinions. Right. A lot depends on what set of data you're using and how you want to apply that to our base population and those kinds of things. But we are having those conversations.
Yes, sir. Next question is: Have you seen news articles about the Thunderbirds and Blue Angels doing flyovers major cities across the nation to thank workers supporting the fight against COVID-19? And will they be flying over Andrews when they hit DC and Baltimore? So
yes, I've seen the news, but I mean, let's be honest. We had them both for our air show last year, so we're a little. We've benefited from a dual show before, but I think what a great thing, right? For them to kind of tour the country, get their training in. Right. That's in the small print of some of the stories, but allows them to continue the train and then also say thanks and show solidarity around the country. Great thing. So the last I was tracking for I think it's DC, Baltimore, Atlanta. There was 3 cities I think they were going to do at once. If I remember right, and April 30th was the date that I'm currently tracking. I actually don't have the route of flight.
I didn't see it. I was looking for it yesterday. I saw the other couple cities they hit, but not here.
So I don't know if they'll be going directly over Andrews or not. I can tell you we don't expect they're basing out of here. So I don't have a good answer for over Andrews, but I would be surprised if you're not able to at least see them as they fly over the metro area.
Yes, sir. All right, next question. Are there plans of decontaminating office spaces prior to the workforce returning to work?
So no. Well, let me caveat that. As a whole, no. I think the CDC guidance is pretty straightforward, that on most surfaces, your threat from any COVID from the virus is about 5 days. That's where it will dissipate on its own, and that's before you take a wipe to it or sanitize or anything. So when I kind of look across the base, the installation, as to how we've kind of progressed through this, I don't see a lot of areas where I would be overly concerned about folks coming back into those spaces just based on time. There also aren't too many facilities on the base that have been completely empty. During this whole time, so I don't know that there's a lot of examples where they locked the door, walked away, and nobody's been inside there for the last 7 weeks. So no, and I'm not overly concerned about that. The functions that have stayed open have they've increased that cleaning cycle. We've seen that across the base. We've done some unique things in the mission areas to make sure that we've got a sanitized workspace, but that's not high on the list. And honestly, what we've seen more of, and we had to get after it in this building, is because the way some folks departed, things like the trash didn't get taken out, and when those doors are locked, the contractors don't go into those spaces. So we actually had the facility manager come back in here starting a couple of weeks ago to get back into those spaces just to do routine cleaning. So that we do need to get after and make sure that as folks start coming back, we've got good workspaces for them to come back to.
Yes, sir. The think you talked about it a little bit, but have you seen what the CDC and Youth Center Facebook pages have been putting out?
Yes. Yeah. No. That's huge fan of that, and what a high level of creativity that they're putting into everything they do over there.
Right.
So that has been fun to watch, and I hope some of the kids that are at home that normally are CDC participants that are not because they're at home with mom and dad are tuning in just to keep connected with some of those providers over there. I think that means a lot to everybody.
Yep. So it's if you're looking for the Facebook page, it's Andrews Child Development Center and Andrews Youth Programs, and you can go to both those Facebook pages and see those updates. We talked about the next question kind of talks about the curbside pickup, but it says, will any other initiatives like that be implemented to improve quality of life for our folks on Andrews?
Well, it's not quite a fair question right now because this is unique times that we're in. But I'll go back to and we've had this conversation many times over the last 2 years, Chief. I think we're interested in any activity that can sustain itself. And that's where we run into dilemmas here on Joint Base Andrews. At the end of the day, our on-base population is a fairly small population when you're talking about business case analysis. And so, when we looked at what we could maybe do at the club, when we looked at things like car washes, all those things that folks definitely want, and I would like them too, there's just been not a lot of interest from the business community based on the business case analysis that they do here. And then our other dilemma at Joint Base Andrews is, Air Force Services looks at what the community can provide. And the community around this base can provide a lot. We live in a large, metropolitan area. And so there's not a lot of appetite to have some of those functions on the installation that the community can provide. So that's kind of where we're at. And curbside pickup is, I think, a pretty good example because we did the barbecue like I mentioned last week, and I think they're charging $14.95. They have a couple different price sets depending on the meal, but that's a relatively cheap meal in this part of the country in the National Capital Region, and so there has to be a price point where people are willing to participate in those activities, but still sustain those activities, and that's where the base has struggled over the last several years, if not even a little longer than that. When we first got here, we were serving chicken wings in the community commons, and it was a huge money loser, and just not sustainable over the long run. So there's just it's interesting. When people come onto the installation, they expect kind of a discounted rate. I do too, because I think that's how we grew up. But that's not quite the reality that we're in anymore. And I have an advantage. I don't need to make money necessarily on these, but I do need to break even. And that has been a challenge since the day you and I got here. So that's how I would qualify the quality of life conversation for the base.
Yes, sir. All right. Yeah. Next question. Did you tune into yesterday's Resilience and Isolation live stream on the topic of domestic violence?
So honestly, I didn't have a chance to tune in, but I saw a little bit of what they did, and I think this was kind of the second in the series that we've tried to do to speak to some of these more difficult topics that are going on in the community. So just like a lot of other folks on the base. Using a little bit of creativity to get out to a community that might be a little isolated right now, I thought that was overall a good thing. And Chief, you and I have had this conversation. As this drags on, you and I become more and more concerned, kind of what the secondary and tertiary effects of this are. And so domestic violence, I thought, was a timely conversation to have, and so I really appreciate them doing that. And we've started to see on the fringes some folks that are getting a little tired of being in their homes, and how we kind of work through that and channel that. I think that's an important conversation to have, and will be for at least the next several weeks.
So I didn't watch it live, but I did watch it last night, and I thought they did a really good job of talking about the resources that are available and some of their strategies. I will say I was disappointed that the comments are hijacked by an aggrieved family from a few years ago and their advocates, and so that didn't really allow for good discussion from anybody else in the community. So I was disappointed by that, but it was a platform for an aggrieved family from a few years ago to come in there, but it kind of took, I think it took a little bit of the wind out of the sails of what we were trying to get at there. So,
yeah. Well, we operate in a public space.
Yeah, absolutely, so. Absolutely. All right, sir. Next question is: what are some telehealth tools available at Malcolm Grow?
So that was an interesting. That's an interesting question to me. And I would broaden it a little more than Malcolm Grow. So Malcolm Grow, where it makes sense, they've been doing teleappointments, they've been doing telemedicine, they've been doing those kinds of things. So that's not universally kind of applicable, but where it makes sense, they've done it. And since I mentioned that, the other thing that we're starting to see, and I would encourage everybody to think about this, is folks have deferred some of their kind of chronic care because of the COVID-19 situation. And I had Vito in, our med group commander. We were in here talking a little bit earlier, and he looks at me and he goes, the progression of cancer is not taking a break because of COVID. And you've started to see that across the country, where for a variety of reasons folks aren't coming in to get their routine care. So I would remind folks that Malcolm Grow is still open for business, and if that's where you get your primary care or you're seeing a specialist over there, and it's something you need to come in for, they are open for business. So if they think they can do that through a telehealth method, they will, just to reduce the foot traffic. But I think we need to start having that conversation of, it's time. It's time for folks to make sure that they're taking care of some of the other things that might be, they might be dealing with. I saw a story this morning that it's showing its head up on immunizations for children across the country because parents aren't bringing their kids in for immunizations, and our immunizations clinic is open. So if you're in that boat, we'll figure out a way to get to yes to make sure that we're taking care of our beneficiary population. But it's not just Malcolm Grow. We've seen the fitness center, we've seen the military family readiness center, we've seen all these organizations kind of come online and figure out ways to meet you where you're at. Right. And I think that's probably the bigger story here. So all those services that we typically provide, I do believe we are providing them. It just looks very, very different. Everybody wants to go back to the TAC Fitness Center. I absolutely understand that, and I do too. But what they have in its place, whether it's through Air Force level subscriptions that are available to our airmen right now, or the fitness staff doing their own thing and having kind of classes on the fly, that's what we can do to make sure that we're offering those same services, even though it's in a vastly different operating space than we thought it would be. So I think it's interesting. A couple of weeks to kind of figure out what is going on and kind of what is happening to us across the installation, and try to settle into a little bit of whatever the new abnormal is. And then I think this installation and the folks that are part of it have just risen to the challenge over and over and over again to come up with creative ways to provide services to our families.
Yes, sir. So now we're on the live questions.
Okay.
So C. Elliott asks, how long will the Virginia gate be closed?
Until there's really a need to open it. And I'm looking at more operational requirement versus convenience. And just based on the traffic this morning at the main gate, I don't foresee a need to open that anytime soon. Pearl Harbor Gate stayed open. I know a lot of folks don't think about that, but so we've had the two gates open, continuously since we started. But the traffic flow, I think it's a reasonable thing to keep Virginia closed for right now. Freely admit it's inconvenient for, especially for groups, our folks in housing, or our families that use CDC-1, but you make up for a little inconvenience because there's not as much traffic on the Beltway right now.
Right. All right. Davina Rhodes wants us to put out there that the JBA library has a tutorial on face shield making available on their page. So please go check that out.
And I didn't specifically mention the library, but I've been tracking some of the things that they've been doing, and it's they're another group that's figured out a way to deliver their service in these conditions, and they've done some extremely creative things for our families. So I forgot to mention the library in particular.
All right. I lost a question there somehow.
Was it a good one?
Well, the question was basically, are the job openings that we have on JBA that's posted on USA Jobs, are they still going forward with those?
So it depends on the flavor of the job, but unless the guidance has changed recently, we are still able to onboard folks into the civil service locally, from the local area. So with some caveats to that, but generally we've been able to continue onboarding folks as this has gone on, so long as they're in the local area. And there's been some things we've had to figure out. There's a drug demand piece of that we've had to figure out. There's a fingerprinting piece of that we've had to figure out. So it's not been perfect, but I think we've been able to continue to onboard folks.
Yes, sir. All right, Timothy Beaton asks, what are the rules regarding regarding children wearing a mask on base? I have a 2, almost 3-year-old that refuses to wear a mask. A couple of weeks ago, we were told we were not allowed to check out of the commissary unless we took her outside. Governor Hogan's order says 9 are recommended, but do not have to. I'm guessing you say 9-year-olds.
Yeah, I mean,
I think it's 2 and under at our clinic, right, to go in?
Yeah, two and unders at the clinic. I don't have a uniform policy for that. That's one of the ones I think I was hopeful common sense would prevail. So let me take a look at that and see if we need to put something out that's guidance wise. But the med group I thought was on to something pretty good with 2. It could probably be a little older than that, but I would go back to common sense. I got it. I mean, we had little kids. And so you put the mask on a 3-year-old and ask them to go through the commissary. That's not going to end well for anybody. And it's about reducing risk. It's not 100%. So the fact that 98% of the people in the commissary have their mask on, that accomplishes what we need to accomplish. So let me take a look at that. And that's the first time I've heard of. It's the first time I've heard of that particular scenario with a small child.
Yes, sir.
And I hope, I'm not sure if it's an active duty family or not, but that's the other reason why we have the hours set up the way we do at the commissary, because we expect our active duty family members, potentially with small children, will take advantage of the fact that the commissary is open, for them from 9 to 11.
Yes, sir. All right. C. Elliott asks another question. She says they'd like to be able to walk, run, and ride bikes on the golf course. Okay. Will that be available once regular ops resume? I don't see how that's safe.
Have you seen some of the golfers on this base? I don't know that I'd want to be out there. Yeah, that's probably going to be a bridge too far. Although we'll take a look maybe during the off season, what's in the realm of the possibility. Yep. But I think we're putting some folks at risk if we intermix the golfers I've seen on this base with pedestrians walking on the paths.
All right. Adama Bilal, they ask. Is the gym going to open anytime soon, even if it's for active duty only who have to maintain a fitness level?
I don't know what anytime soon means.
Yeah.
So whatever answer you want me to say, anytime soon, not this week, and probably not next week, and the week after that's not looking great either. Yeah. But much past that, I couldn't give you a good answer. And I go back to, we want to open those things. We need to do it safely. I'm not. It's interesting, this active duty only approach to the fitness center. I'm not sure exactly what that solves if we go down that road. because active duty are just as susceptible to the spread of this disease as anybody else. It just so happens, based on our age group, some of the effects aren't necessarily as bad. We're not quite there yet on opening back up the fitness center. But do take advantage of, outdoor exercise is allowed. Right. So I don't want to be short with anybody, but the Air Force PT test, which has been suspended for fitness testing has been suspended, but when we're talking push-ups, sit-ups, a run, and a waist measurement, it seems like you can get to that level of fitness, which is probably not where you usually are at, but you can get to that level of fitness without violating any social distancing rules. So again, time to be a little creative, and I got it. People use that fitness center. It's not just for exercise; it's for stress. And as soon as we're able to do that in a safe manner, you bet we will. But until then, figure out what new normal looks like, for you, and what that does for how you can maintain some level of fitness while you're doing that.
Yes, sir.
Amazon's still delivering kettlebells, I think. Right. So not a great answer, but there's some flexibility in there, I think.
Yes, sir. Tim Melton asks, when will the golf course open?
Soon. But I don't know what soon is. Yeah. I don't know. Right. So it's interesting. Golf course has been interesting, because Virginia came out with a different set of guidelines than Maryland, and so Virginia, there's social distancing golf, but not in Fairfax and Loudoun. I think those two counties said no. We're fully aware that people are driving to perhaps play a round of golf at a course that's open in Virginia. Maryland did not go down that road. Maryland, kind of went across the board and said all those activities are shut down. I can tell you that unless it's changed very recently, I know the golf course at Fort Belvoir is also closed. So, this puts an installation like ours in an interesting position. Because we want to be good community partners. We want to be supportive of what the governor is trying to do. But then we also are kind of our own federal entity unto itself. So all these things have been, interesting challenges to navigate. And, the golf course is right up there. Because I'll tell you, they've put a ton of work into the golf course over the down time of year. It is looking pretty good, better than it has since I've been here, and I look forward to seeing golfers back out there.
Yes, sir. John Ricciardi asks or states, I'd also like to know who is enforcing mask wearing in the BX and food court. The manager at the BX said she couldn't enforce it, which that's not true.
I don't know what that means. So this is the deal. This is community effort. And so again, I go back to, on any given day, 98% on this, the folks on the base are doing what they need to do. That doesn't mean everybody does. And so, I shooed somebody out of the shop the other morning because I didn't like his answer for why I didn't have a mask.
And did it at the food court the other day as well.
Yeah, and so we've had the first sergeants make some rounds at a couple locations, but it's not perfect. And quite honestly, I'm not really interested in having our defenders, carry people out of the food court because they left their mask in the car. So it's a common sense thing. It's a community enforcement thing, and it's not going to be perfect. And it's not perfect outside the gate. It's not perfect inside the gate. But I'm pretty comfortable with the effect I think that we've been able to achieve.
Yes, sir.
And I'm not looking. When we started mandatory masks at the BX, all I asked Thea, our general manager over there, was I said, if somebody shows up without a mask, just remind them that they need to have the mask in there. And again, when I've done the walkthroughs and you've done the walkthroughs, I think we're pretty close to 98%, maybe 95% in that ballpark. So I feel pretty good about where we're at.
All right. Katie Marie asks, does the base have testing kits? How can we help advocate for the base to receive more testing kits? And do you speak to Governor Hogan on these matters? And do we have any contact tracing capabilities on base currently?
Okay.
That's 4 questions.
That's 4 questions. So Governor Hogan's got a little bigger problems on his plate than Joint Base Andrews. So we have reached out to the county, though we work with the county, especially at the public health level. But I think Maryland's a state of 8 million people, and we're a pretty small subset of that. So no, the governor and I don't talk a whole lot on that issue. Contract tracing on the base, I'd say yes. The answer to that is yes. We've had a pretty robust contact tracing capability since this started, primarily through our public health. That's why our residents in Liberty Park got the letter from me saying, hey, if you're COVID positive or presumptive positive from an off-base provider, make sure you notify our public health, and then we can do the tracing. The county also has a pretty robust tracing effort, although it's not, I think, where they would like it to be, and that's true across the country. So definitely have ability to trace, and we've seen that activated here on the base with great success. We've had a handful of active duty positives, and we've been able to quarantine and isolate and completely minimize the effects of that past the individuals that tested positive. So we've had great success, and that's a credit to everybody over at Malcolm Grow that's kind of led this charge. So the testing capability, that was a big conversation. I actually sat in a town hall last week with all the wing commanders and the Vice Chief of Staff of the Air Force, and that question came up more than one time. And I would have to refer back to what the Department of Defense has kind of outlined as their way forward, and they're gonna do this by tier. And so they've talked about 3 tiers for the military forces, and tier 1 are those things that are no-fail missions. You're talking about nuclear alert forces, national airspace kind of alert forces. Those kinds of things are in tier 1, and so the goal, unless it's changed, as I understand it, is by the end of May to have some significant portion of that force tested. And then it'll trickle down to tier 2 and tier 3, and there are some tier 1 and tier 2 functions on this base, but I think most of us, including me and you, would probably fall into tier 3. So it's going to be later in the summer, I think, before we ever got a phone call to go preemptively do a test. But I will say that identifying the symptoms and then it's been fairly successful at Joint Base Andrews. I got the count last night. I think we're just a shade over 60 total positives that have come in into the base. Most of those are beneficiaries over at Malcolm Grow, so not our base population per se. And quite honestly, most of those have recovered. So we're tracking a very small number of folks that are actively positive. So the measures that have been put in place seem to have had the desired effect. Did I cover all the?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, because the testing, the testings, that's the big one. That's kind of the unknown as to how quickly we'll be able to ramp that up. And it would be easy to say, yep, we should just test everybody, but we're just not, logistically, we're not able to do that. Not only the materials, but the labs that do this as well. So we've got a ways to go on that.
Sir, Russ Gately asks, dental processing has been challenging. Any way to contact them easier? I guess I would need to know. Yeah,
we got to know the specifics on that.
Yeah.
But that's the theme of that has come up a couple times in a couple kind of service areas of the base for out processing. That's the first one I've heard of dental. I know we've had some bumps in the road in medical, and I know we've had a couple other areas where we need to figure out a little better solution in the current environment. So if you want to get a name offline, yes, then we can do that.
All right. David Roth asks, is there a possibility of having curbside pickup for books from the library? I guess we'll ask.
I love that idea.
Yeah, ask public health and the library how we can best do that.
I love that idea.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good idea. Do they get to pick the book? That would be even more fun.
I'm sure.
Okay. All right.
Sharon asks, are we still offering bus transportation services from Malcolm Grove to Bethesda?
No, that's been shut down.
Yeah, that contract ended.
Yep. It wasn't a base contract, by the way. It was Walter Reed's contract.
Some other questions about that same issue. All right, Jonathan Rethford asks, with the barbershops being closed and most people not being able to cut their own hair without looking ridiculous.
I don't understand what the problem is.
Yeah.
Never have.
Will there be a waiver?
We've covered this at length.
Yes,
Commanders have the authority to make smart decisions about grooming standards at least for the 11th Wing. I can't speak for the other organizations on base.
All right, that's it, sir. That's all the questions. It was a bit longer today than last week.
Well, those were good questions, though.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, what else is on your mind?
Yeah, I think it's I'm in the same boat as a lot of folks in that I'm looking at transitioning out of the military, and it's a difficult time, and it's scary out there. If you're looking now, if you're going to go to school and you've been approved to go to school, or you have a formal, you've had a job offer and you've signed that contract, then obviously less so. But if you're looking to get out of the military and then go job hunt, this is a really bad time for that. And I've through the couple of things that I have been doing, I've gotten a lot of advice from folks to say, if you can stay in, stay in. If whether you can extend that for 6 months to a year, because there's 26 million Americans out without a job. And if you're looking to get out of the Air Force and move into the private sector, that you're going to be now going against 26 million Americans who are also looking for jobs, and they already have experience in those jobs.
Yep.
They just so it's a tough time to transition out of the military right now. And so, yeah, there's a lot of, like I said, I'm going through this as well, and I'm weighing all these options as I go forward. And the folks that are very experienced in this are saying, stay in if you can. Yeah. Which makes, gives you a little bit of pause right there.
Yeah.
As this normalizes. So that's a lot what I've been thinking about, obviously for selfish reasons, but I've been trying to pass that information along as well.
I thought it was, it's interesting, right, that if you had an approved retirement or separation date, under all these stop movement orders, you were allowed to proceed.
Right.
And that's, to your point, that's a group that might not want to proceed anymore. So we've had some folks come back to kind of extend, push that retirement date out on a case-by-case basis, and we've been able to work some of those things. But it's, I think it's a really stressful time, and we're not quite sure what it looks like, even when what is on the other side, and what does that look like, and how does that affect people's transitions. So yeah, absolutely. And then the wing, the base is still gonna on the eve of transition itself.
Right.
So we've obviously been thinking a lot about that. We said goodbye to our 11th Wing Vice Commander last week, and our new Vice Commander is in the seat now, Colonel Roy Oberhaus. And you and I shall be moving on unless something changes in June. And I know the 89th leadership team will be moving on about the same time. So a lot of starting to get into that season of usually the season of changes,
right.
And this one under kind of different circumstances.
Right.
So I've been thinking about that quite a bit as well. So yeah, that's good. So I have to do one thing. This is selfish, but Mom watches every week, right? Back in Ohio. So Mom's birthday is coming up this week on May 1st.
Happy birthday, Mom.
So I'll give a shout out to Mom.
Yeah.
She will be 72 by my math.
Right.
And to think of the things she's seen in her lifetime. The invention of the airplane, the invention of the automobile, all those things. It's just spectacular when you think about it. So, so happy birthday, Mom. and because I know she watches every week because she gives me the first critique after we're done.
It's good that we have one fan.
One consistent.
Yes.
Well, fan's a stretch, but we certainly have one consistent person that watches. So that's, I guess that's a win for us. So yeah. So with that, we'll plan on being here again a week from now and talking about anything that might change. So everybody have a great week. Thanks.